and welcome. In this video I will be reviewing the fantasy novel The Elvenbane by Andrea Norton and Mercedes Lackey. A little bit of information about the two lovely lady authors here. First of all, I have a propensity to buying every piece of Mercedes Lackey I find. I discovered her when I was in middle school, and I even have Need, the sword from By the Sword from her, tattooed on my arm. So I do have a love of her writing. I'd actually never heard of Andrea Norton prior to reading and finding and reading this book. Mercedes Lackey was born in 1950 and she's still alive and still writing a lot. I think she comes out with a new novel at least once a year. Andrea Norton was born in 1912 and unfortunately passed away in 2005. And I say unfortunately because this is one in a series of 4 books, and the 4th one didn't happen. What the little bit that had been worked on has been passed to Mercedes Lackey, but there is no tentative date when the series will be finished, which is kind of disappointing. Mercedes Lackey is most well known for her Valdemir fantasy world. That's the world that I know her from. That's the world that the sword is tattooed from. Andrea Norton, despite me never having read anything from her before or hearing of her before, again, I don't really watch a whole lot of booktube, so sorry, that's probably my fault. She's actually the first woman that had ever been inducted in the Gandalf Grandmaster, as a Gandalf Grandmaster, a fantasy, and she is also the first woman to be in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. So she has chops. I just haven't heard of her before, but reading this book did make me very curious as to read more from her, both fantasy and sci-fi as well. This book, let me give you a little synopsis of this book. So the world that these two ladies are building, you have humans, you have elves, and you have dragons. The world in which they are inhabiting, the humans are natives of that land, and dragons and elves have come through gates into this world, this dimension that's not really clarified yet, and they habitated this planet. Both elves and dragons came from very inhospitable worlds where they were kind of like fighting for their lives, so to speak. And they find this human inhabited world that is very cushy, very lush, plenty of prey, and they take over. The dragons actually kind of do their own thing, but the elves subjugate the humans. And so the elves own the humans. The story opens up being introduced to Serena Daith, a female concubine slave of Lord Diren, who is an elf. And Lord Diren is considered the most powerful elf in this world. He also has quite the affinity for having human companions. However, he views them as less than because, you know, they're slaves. They're less than. And the reason why the elves are able to subjugate the humans is because of the fact that elves and dragons both have magic. And humans actually have magic, but not the right kind. So the way this world is set up is that humans have mind magic. They have the ability of telepathy and telekinesis, whereas elves have more traditional magic. You know, they can do glamours, they can change the weather, they can create food and illusions and that kind of stuff. You know, they can create monsters. Actually, one of the things in the book is them like crossbreeding and adding magic and creating different species of animals, which I thought was kind of interesting. But dragons have true magic, so they have true, Moxie, please. They have a true mastery of being able to change their form. So they're actually physically changing their form. It's not a glamour to make them look shiny or like they are in this different form. I'm so sorry, I cannot get her to stop. If I This is Moxie, by the way, if you've never seen her before. And dragons have true magic, so they can truly change things, not just the weather, but also themselves, and they're able to actually change into humans and elves, and they kind of play tricks on both to gain more information about both races, and also to try to make advantageous changes for dragons in their world. So like if the elves are causing some issues, like they're changing the weather too much and it's causing some issues with the dragon's game that they hunt, they go and create mischief and intrigue as well, and that's also in the story. But you open up with this concubine, Serena Darth, and she has become the head concubine for Lord Dyron. And in order for there not to be any half-elves, the elven lords and ladies feed their human slaves that they, in their harem, a mixture so that way they can't get pregnant. Well, Serena unfortunately ends up having another human concubine rival, and they tamper with her food, and so she gets pregnant. And the reason why it's not cool for there to be half-elves is because you find out that there was something called the Wizard War, where the half-elves had the most magic from both worlds, from both elves and humans. So they had the mind magic of their human parent, and then they had the other magic from the elves, or the better magic from the elves. And so they are like truly powerful. They are more powerful than most of the elven lords. So there was this big wizard war where they were trying to like fight back so that way humans wouldn't be subjugated, and that's how the humans became subjugated like completely by the elven lords, is because of the wizard war, where the half-elves were pretty much completely wiped out. And since then there has been a ban on there being half-elf children. And I'm so sorry. They're being half-elf children. And so when she finds out she's pregnant, she flees into the desert, and that is where she runs into Alamarana, or Alara, as she's referred to for the most time in the book, which is a dragon shaman. And so Serena fled Lord Dyron's as out into the desert. She has only known the comforts of the Lord's care, so she is not equipped to survive in the desert, especially pregnant. And she finds an oasis, and then Alara flies in, also pregnant, and she finds Serena in her labor, and Serena doesn't survive the labor. And so Alara, the dragon, feels for this woman and takes her baby back to the kin, which are the dragon kin, and raises her as her own, as an adopted daughter. When she already has a son, whose name is Kimanorel, just referred to in the book as Keyman, and he has a menagerie of animals from this world that he cares for. And this woman, or this baby girl from Serena that Alara has just rescued from the desert, it is named Shayna and is turned over to Keyman to take care of. And Keyman's like, why would my mother save a two-legger? She must be of the kin, and she's just stuck in this form. And so she's raised as one of the dragons. All the other dragons don't like her being there. They see her as less than, as a filthy two-legger. That's what they call her. Whereas Keyman views her as an equal. She has strong magic because she's a half-elf. And what ends up happening is that Serena gets kicked out of the dragon place after she becomes a teenager, because there's some conflict there with some bullies. And so she gets kicked out and then is reintroduced to two-legger world where it's like, oh, I am not a dragon, and I didn't know there were other people with that just, there were other bipedals out there. And so she gets thrown into the slave pens, and then she gets rescued by other half-elves. Oh, look, there are other half-elves. And it's just, I feel like I'm sounding like I didn't enjoy the book. And that is not necessarily true. So for me, the beginning of the book, reading about Serena Dave and Lord Diran, while I understand why it was important to building the world and the story of this book, I just have a general distaste for the conflict of the book, especially when it involves female characters where the main protagonist is female, being slavery. I just normally have a general distaste and dislike for that being the thing that has to be overcome in the book. Like, that is the struggle of life that they come from, just because I, you know, have a general distaste for slavery. Who'd have thought? I just don't like it. I don't like it. I think it's kind of too easy. I understand why it's done. I just don't generally like it. So whenever that is kind of like the opening to a book that isn't actually a factual book about, you know, someone overcoming real life slavery. So if it's an autobiography or if it's a biographical book, I will totally read that. But when it's used as like an easy plot device, it's distasteful to me. This is written in 1991, so I can kind of just, I'm kind of just like, okay, it was easy way for them to build conflict into this world. Fine. As far as Shayna goes, who is the Serena's daughter, who ends up being the main protagonist of the book, she's just kind of, it feels very Legend of Korra, if that makes any sense. It's just like, she's super powerful, super strong, but is definitely a teenager and is angsty and has her own moral compass that she's following. So if you've watched the Legend of Korra, it's kind of similar, except there are dragons in this. And there aren't 4 nations at war. It is just, it's dragons and elves and humans and half-elves. I did appreciate the ending. The ending was quite surprising to me. Shayna ends up with a love interest at some point in this book. It's an interesting choice that they made for the love interest, the initial love interest, and the ending was different. It was unexpected, and which is unusual. Normally, I can figure out how the book is going to go. I did enjoy this book enough to try to locate and successfully finding the Elven Blood, which is the second book in this series, because I was surprised by the ending of this one. If you like dragons and elves and humans and half-elves, you might like this. If you like The Legend of Korra and like really enjoyed Korra, you will probably also like Shayna. But yeah, I am interested to read more Andrea Norton. Like, I could kind of tell what parts in the development of the story were Mercedes Lackey, but I would like to be able to separate their writing styles out. So I'm going to try to locate some stuff from Andrea Norton now and read some more of her. I like the book. I'd recommend it if you like The Legend of Korra, and I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys next Monday for another review. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bye. There'll be some more videos on the screen somewhere. Thank you very much for putting up with Miss Moxie. I cannot control cats. No one can control cats, so. Okay.